We all watched the travesty that took place last night, and Stephanie White trying to crash out on Caitlin Clark, Raven Johnson fouling out in 9 minutes. I mean, it just was a complete joke by Stephanie White. I think she exposed herself. I think she exposed the fact that she's not a good coach at all, and she needs to be fired. And if you don't want to fire her, Caitlin, looks like the clown show continues to go on in the Indiana Fever organization led by Amber Cox, clown show, Kelly Crosskoff, clown show, and the bozo of all bozos, head coach Stephanie White, who's just, all of them, they are just sabotaging Caitlin Clark's career. It looks like GM Andrew Cox fires off on Caitlin Clark fans on social media and starts blocking them as well. This is an immature, nasty organization. Caitlin Clark and her agent Aaron Kane need to demand a trade immediately.
The Indiana Fever organization is in full panic mode right now, and what's happening behind the scenes is starting to leak out in ways that have everyone asking the same question. Is this incompetence or something deliberate? Over the past few days, the team's leadership has been scrambling to contain what's becoming an impossible situation. The walls are closing in fast, and the fallout is about to get a whole lot messier before anyone tries to fix it. Rumors of sabotage have reached a boiling point. The front office is in damage control. Critics are being silenced. And at the center of all this chaos is Caitlin Clark, the most exciting player in basketball, watching her career get undermined by the very organization that should be protecting her. This isn't just about bad coaching or poor management decisions anymore. This is about an organization that appears to be actively working against its own best interest. And tonight, we're breaking down exactly how it got this bad and why the pressure is about to explode. Last night's game was the moment everything came into focus. What unfolded on the court wasn't just bad coaching. It was something that left analysts, fans, and commentators completely stunned. Stephanie White, the head coach of the Indiana Fever, made a decision in the opening quarter that seemed designed to confuse everyone watching. Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement. In just the first 10 minutes of play, she rotated 11 different players into the game. 11. That's not a strategy you see in professional basketball at any level, and it's certainly not something that happens by accident or miscalculation. When you're cycling through that many bodies in such a short span of time, you're not building rhythm. You're not giving your starters a chance to find their flow or get comfortable against the opposing defense. You're actively preventing it from happening. Every time a player starts to settle in, get into a groove, or develop any kind of chemistry with their teammates, they're yanked out and someone else comes in. It's chaotic by design. Basketball is a rhythm sport. Players need minutes to understand what a coach wants, to read their teammates, to develop the kind of instinctive connection that makes championship-level teams work. What White did was the opposite of that. To make matters infinitely worse, there was one moment during all this chaos that stood out above the rest and sparked immediate outrage. Ty Harris, a bench player who hadn't been particularly impressive, got put back into the game before Caitlin Clark, the franchise's generational talent and the entire reason people are watching basketball in Indiana, got her minutes back. Think about that for a second. You have the most exciting young player in the sport sitting on the bench, and you're giving playing time to someone else first. The decision wasn't just questionable, it was insulting. It made zero basketball sense from a competitive standpoint. Analysts immediately started breaking down the tape after the game, trying to understand the logic. There wasn't any. The offense runs through Clark. The team's entire system is supposed to be built around getting her the ball in rhythm so she can do what she does better than anyone else in the league. Instead, White was removing her from situations where she could impact the game and inserting role players who can't move the needle the same way. Every basketball mind watching understood what everyone else was seeing. This didn't look like strategy. It looked intentional. The game itself became secondary to the coaching decisions. Fans weren't focused on the final score or the team's record. They were focused on what appeared to be a deliberate effort to limit Clark's effectiveness and her minutes. Social media exploded within minutes. People who cover basketball for a living started calling it out. Commentators who work for major outlets began questioning what they were seeing. This wasn't a controversial take. This was Basketball Analysis 101. If you want your best player to succeed, you don't pull her out randomly. You don't bench her for lesser players. You don't sabotage your own offense by removing the person who makes it work. What made it even worse was the context. The Fever are in a competitive situation. Every game matters. They can't afford to experiment with bizarre rotations or pull their best players for random stretches. They can't afford to give minutes to players who don't fit the system. They can't afford to do anything that prevents them from winning. And yet, that's exactly what happened. It felt like White was more interested in proving some kind of point than in actually winning basketball games. The pattern started becoming impossible to ignore after this game. Fans who had been giving the coaching staff the benefit of the doubt started connecting dots. They began rewatching previous games with fresh eyes, looking for other instances of similar decisions. And they found them. Multiple games showed the same pattern. Clark would be playing well, building momentum, and then she'd get pulled. Someone else would come in, the offense would stall, and then she'd come back in to fix things. It became clear that this wasn't random. This was happening repeatedly. One game doesn't prove anything, but patterns do. And what unfolded on that court wasn't just one bad coaching decision. It was the clearest evidence yet that something deeper was going on in the Indiana Fever organization. Something that went beyond typical coaching mistakes or miscalculations. This looked coordinated. It looked intentional. And it had everyone asking, what else is happening behind closed doors? What happened next is where the real story gets interesting, and it's where the organization's response became almost as telling as the coaching decisions themselves. The social media response to the game was immediate and brutal. Fans, analysts, commentators, and basketball personalities all started calling out what they'd witnessed. The criticism was valid, specific, and grounded in actual basketball knowledge. These weren't random people on Twitter complaining about nothing. These were credible voices pointing out legitimate flaws in how the team was being coached and managed. Instead of the front office staying silent, which would have been the professional move, or addressing the actual concerns with substance and explanation, Amber Cox, the team's general manager, went on a blocking spree. She started removing critics from her social media accounts. She began silencing anyone who pointed out what everyone with eyes could see happening on the court. When high-profile voices like Jason Whitlock, a sports commentator with significant platform and reach, started calling out the obvious flaws in how this team is being run, Cox didn't respond with facts. She didn't provide counter-arguments. She didn't explain her coaching philosophy or roster construction. She hit the block button. That move alone told you everything you needed to know about the confidence level inside the organization. You don't silence critics when you're doing things right. You silence them when you're scared they're exposing something you can't defend with logic or evidence. A confident GM with a strong organizational plan would welcome the scrutiny. They'd use it as an opportunity to explain their vision. They'd engage with the criticism constructively. Cox did the opposite. She responded like someone who knows she can't defend her decisions under scrutiny. The blocking didn't stop with one person. It became a pattern. Other critics got blocked. Fans who asked legitimate questions got removed from her followers. It created this bizarre situation where the GM was actively working to control the narrative by removing people from her social media instead of actually addressing what they were saying. It's the digital equivalent of putting your fingers in your ears and refusing to listen. It's what someone does when they're panicking. What made this even more notable was the context of why Cox was upset in the first place. Reports suggest that she was bothered by the amount of media attention given to the story of Clark being late scratched from a recent game. She complained on social media that a negative story about Clark was getting more coverage than a team victory. A general manager was more upset that a player's situation was making headlines than she was concerned about actually fixing the underlying issues. That's not how professional sports organizations operate. That's not how leaders behave. The social media posts from Cox screamed desperation. They were defensive, bitter, and focused on the wrong things. Instead of addressing legitimate basketball concerns raised by credible voices, she was worried about how stories were being framed online. Instead of taking responsibility for roster decisions or coaching hires, she was attacking the people asking questions. It created a perception that the organization had something to hide. When you're blocking journalists and prominent commentators, you're essentially confirming that you can't defend your decisions in the open. The blocking spree sent shockwaves through the basketball community because it's so unusual. GMs don't typically use their personal social media accounts to wage war against critics. They certainly don't block prominent media figures for doing their jobs. It violated basic professional norms and made the organization look chaotic and out of control. It raised questions about leadership maturity and whether the front office had any perspective on what was actually important. What's fascinating is that the blocking didn't silence anyone. If anything, it amplified the criticism. When you block people publicly, more people pay attention to why. When you remove critics from your social media, people assume you're doing it because you're afraid of what they're saying. The move backfired spectacularly. Instead of controlling the narrative, Cox amplified it. Instead of making the criticism go away, she made it bigger. And instead of projecting confidence and competence, she projected panic and weakness. That's when everyone started wondering, if the leadership is this defensive, what are they hiding? The defensive schemes coming out of this coaching staff are being described as some of the most baffling in professional basketball. And when you actually break down what White has the team doing, it's hard to disagree with that assessment. The Fever are switching 1 through 5, which means that a guard who might be 5'9" is regularly matched up against a center in the paint. It's a mismatch disaster that creates advantages for every single opponent they face. It's like the coaching staff is actively trying to create defensive breakdowns. Any competent coach at the professional level would identify this problem immediately and fix it. You'd look at the tape for one game, see that your guards are getting destroyed by much larger players in the post, and you'd change the scheme. You wouldn't keep doing it night after night, but that's exactly what White is doing. She doubles down on the switching scheme even when it's clearly not working, even when it's costing the team games, even when everyone in the basketball world is pointing out how flawed it is. Game announcers have started pointing out the insanity of the Fever's defensive strategies during live broadcasts. When the people whose job it is to call the game are questioning your defensive philosophy on television, you've lost the plot completely. These aren't amateur analysts making wild accusations. These are professional commentators with decades of basketball experience, and they're confused by what they're seeing. That level of scrutiny from qualified voices is devastating for a coaching staff's credibility. The excessive switching isn't just a minor flaw. It's a fundamental problem that undermines the entire team's ability to compete on defense. In the modern NBA and WNBA, defense requires versatility, but it also requires positioning and matchup discipline. You can't just have everyone switch on everything. At some point, you have to protect your rim and use size advantages. The Fever are doing the opposite. They're creating situations where their biggest defensive liabilities are exposed repeatedly. What makes this even more suspicious is that White doesn't seem interested in adjusting. A normal coach would experiment, see that something isn't working, and pivot. White appears committed to this strategy despite overwhelming evidence that it's hurting the team. She's not just making a mistake once or twice. She's making it systematically, night after night, game after game. That level of consistency in a bad decision starts to look less like incompetence and more like something else entirely. Here's where the sabotage narrative gains real traction. These bad defensive decisions directly impact Clark's ability to be effective. When your guards are constantly getting torched on switches, the opposing offense is generating easy looks from three-point range and scoring in the paint. That forces Clark to work harder defensively, which exhausts her. It takes away from her ability to run the offense on the other end. It's like the defensive scheme is designed to tire out your best player so she can't be as effective offensively. Whether intentional or not, that's the result. The scheme also impacts the team's overall performance in ways that are measurable and obvious. Teams that play the Fever know exactly what to do. Attack the switches, get a smaller defender on a bigger player, and score. It's not complicated. Any opponent with a basic basketball IQ can exploit it. The fact that White isn't adjusting suggests either she doesn't understand basketball at a fundamental level, or she's committed to something other than winning. Looking at the data and the game tape, the Fever switch more than any other team in the entire league. That's not a stylistic choice. That's not a unique coaching philosophy. That's a team doing something that doesn't work and doubling down on it. Film study should have revealed this problem months ago. Adjustments should have been made. Instead, the team continues down this path, getting worse defensively and losing games they should be winning. When you combine the defensive issues with the bizarre rotations and the way Clark is being used, a pattern emerges that's impossible to ignore. Every element seems designed to limit her effectiveness, tire her out, or undermine her performance. Whether it's intentional sabotage or just catastrophic incompetence, the result is the same. Caitlin Clark is not being set up for success in Indiana. Here's where it gets complicated, and this is where the allegations start to carry more weight because they're being made by credible voices in sports media. There are 4 women at the top of this organization who keep getting blamed for this entire circus: Stephanie White, Amber Cox, Lynn Dunn, and Kelly Crosskopf. They all worked together years ago, and they've reunited to run the Fever together. That shared history creates something problematic in any organization. A circle of protection where nobody holds anyone else accountable for failures because they're all friends. When you have a tight-knit group of people who have worked together for years running an organization, it becomes very difficult to have honest conversations about performance and accountability. If one person makes a bad decision, can the others really evaluate it objectively when they have decades of personal and professional history together? Or do they protect each other because of those relationships? The Fever's front office appears to be operating under the latter dynamic. Critics are claiming, and it's important to be clear that these are allegations being made by commentators and media voices, not verified facts, that these 4 are following some kind of coordinated plan that extends beyond basketball. Jason Whitlock has been particularly vocal about this, suggesting that the organization is operating based on priorities other than winning basketball games and building a championship team. He's alleged that if the Fever were run purely as a business, the decision to build around Clark would be the easiest call in the world. She brings fans. She brings ratings. She brings revenue. Every business metric says, invest in this player, protect this player, build everything around this player. But according to allegations circulating in media and online spaces, if the organization is more committed to other agendas and internal politics, those business goals take a backseat. Again, these are allegations. They're not proven facts. But the fact that these claims are gaining traction and being repeated by credible voices says something significant about how this organization is perceived right now. When multiple independent commentators start making similar allegations without coordination, it suggests there's a perception problem that goes beyond 1 or 2 isolated incidents. The timing of when these 4 came together matters too. They have history. They know each other. They have loyalty to each other. That loyalty might be preventing the kind of honest evaluation and tough decisions that need to happen when leadership is failing. In a healthy organization, if a coach is making terrible decisions, the GM fires them. If a GM is building a bad roster, the president of operations gets involved. But in an organization where everyone is friends and has worked together for years, those conversations might not happen the way they should. What's particularly telling is that no one inside the organization has pushed back publicly against these allegations. If the sabotage claims are completely false, why isn't the leadership team coming out forcefully to defend their decision-making? Why isn't there a detailed explanation of the coaching philosophy and roster construction strategy? Silence in the face of these allegations reads as an inability to defend the decisions under scrutiny. If the decisions were sound, you'd expect to hear about it. The structure of this leadership team, 4 women who all know each other, all have history together, all have some level of loyalty to each other, creates potential conflicts of interest that a healthy organization would address. There should be checks and balances. There should be people willing to question bad decisions, even if it means questioning a friend. There should be a clear hierarchy where one person is ultimately responsible and accountable. The Fever's structure doesn't appear to have those safeguards. Whether the allegations about coordinated sabotage are true or not, the organizational structure itself is problematic. When friends run an organization together, accountability suffers. When people are more loyal to each other personally than they are to winning, priorities get confused. And when nobody is willing to make tough decisions because it would damage personal relationships, the entire organization suffers. That's exactly what appears to be happening in Indiana. The friendship circle is protecting its own, and Caitlin Clark is paying the price for it. The roster construction tells a story that's impossible to ignore, and it's not a flattering one for the front office. Instead of surrounding Clark with shooters who space the floor and athletic defenders who can protect her and make her job easier, the Fever have made acquisitions that simply don't fit any coherent system or philosophy. It's like the team was built by people who don't understand how to construct a winning roster around a generational talent. Think about what a modern basketball team needs to build around a point guard like Clark. You need floor spacers. You need players who can shoot from three-point range and force opponents to defend them outside, which opens up driving lanes and creates better opportunities for pick-and-roll offense. You need athletes on the wings who can play defense at a high level and move the ball. You need a big who can protect the rim and finish at the basket when Clark creates opportunities. Instead, the Fever went after players who don't mesh with any of that. In the first offseason, the team went chasing after players who didn't fit the system at all. It's like they had no clear vision for how they wanted to play or what pieces they needed around their franchise player. The acquisitions seemed random, like they were checking boxes rather than building a coherent team. Free agent signings that looked confusing at the time still look confusing now that we're seeing how they actually fit on the court. Then in the second offseason, the team paid big money to veterans, thinking that established players would somehow elevate the roster. But those veterans aren't moving the needle the way everyone hoped they would. They're not addressing the fundamental issues with how the team is constructed. They're not making the system work better. From a pure basketball perspective, it looks like the Fever had unlimited resources and one of the most exciting players in basketball to build around, and they still managed to construct a roster that doesn't make sense. Amber Cox, the general manager responsible for personnel decisions, is being slammed for her scouting and evaluation skills. How do you miss this badly when you have a franchise player of Clark's caliber to build around? How do you not understand what pieces would complement her skill set? How do you not recognize the difference between role players who help and role players who hurt? When a GM puts together a roster this poorly, especially with the resources and opportunity she has, you have to start questioning whether the failure is accidental or intentional. The salary cap situation is also revealing. The Fever could have made different choices. They could have invested in a specific type of player or pursued free agents who fit a clear system. Instead, they've spent money somewhat haphazardly, making moves that don't appear to follow any strategic plan. It's like they're throwing darts at a board and hoping something sticks, rather than having a clear blueprint for success. Watch how other organizations build around their superstars. Teams with players like a Ja Wilson or Paige Buchers don't construct rosters by accident. They identify what their best player needs and they acquire it methodically. They have a vision. They execute on that vision. The Fever appear to have neither a clear vision nor the ability to execute it. What's particularly damning is that the roster isn't even competitive in the way it needs to be. The team should be significantly better than they are. Clark is that good. But instead, they're struggling because the pieces around her don't work together. The offensive spacing is poor. The defensive versatility is lacking. The ball movement isn't where it needs to be. These are problems that start with roster construction, and Cox made the decisions that led to them. The front office has had multiple off-seasons to address the roster composition. They've had access to the same film study, the same analytics, and the same information that every other team has. There's no excuse for building this poorly around a player as talented as Clark. Either Cox doesn't understand how to scout, or she's not trying to build a winning team. Either way, the result is the same. A roster that doesn't maximize Clark's talents, doesn't surround her with the right pieces, and doesn't give the team a realistic chance to compete at the highest level. That's a management failure that goes directly to the top of the organization. There's a level of bitterness coming from the front office toward Caitlin Clark that's unprecedented in professional sports. It's the kind of thing you read about and can't quite believe is real until you see the evidence with your own eyes. Reports suggest that Amber Cox was more upset about the narrative around Clark being late scratched from a game than she was excited or satisfied about the team defeating Portland. Let that sink in for a moment. Your team wins a basketball game, and the general manager is complaining about how that win is being covered in the media because of something that happened with your franchise player. She took to social media to voice her frustration. She complained that a negative story about Clark was getting more attention than a team victory. That kind of petty jealousy from a general manager toward her own superstar is not how professional organizations operate at any level. It's not how healthy leadership behaves. It reveals something deeply troubling about the priorities and mindset of the person running the organization. A GM's job is to put together the best roster possible, hire the best coaching staff possible, and put the team in position to win. Her job is not to be upset that her star player is getting more media attention than the team's wins. That complaint exposed a fundamental problem with how the Fever's leadership views Clark's presence on the roster. Instead of seeing her as the greatest asset the organization has, something that should be celebrated and maximized, they appear to see her as a threat to the narrative they want to control. They want credit for the wins. They want recognition for their decisions. But when Clark is the biggest story, it means they're not getting the spotlight they think they deserve. That's narcissism masquerading as management. The emotional response from Cox tells you everything about how the organization really feels about having a generational talent in their building. If they were thrilled about Clark, proud of her, invested in her success, none of this bitterness would exist. You'd see a GM promoting her player, celebrating her accomplishments, and using her star power to build the franchise. Instead, you're seeing defensiveness, jealousy, and resentment. That's not the behavior of someone who's committed to winning. The situation became even more ironic when you look at what happened with Portland next. That same Portland team that the Fever beat, the win that Cox was so upset wasn't getting enough credit in the media narrative, came back and absolutely demolished Indiana in a humiliating blowout. The victory that prompted Cox's social media complaining turned out to be a fluke. It was a team that wasn't very good sneaking out a win, not evidence of a well-coached, well-constructed basketball team. The blowout loss exposed the truth. The Fever aren't built to win consistently, and the earlier victory meant nothing in the grand scheme of things. When the team fell apart in that second matchup against Portland, it highlighted exactly what critics had been saying. The coaching is inconsistent. The roster doesn't fit together properly. The team has fundamental issues that won't be fixed by getting upset on social media or complaining about media narratives. They can only be fixed by making real changes, firing the coach, rebuilding the roster, or completely restructuring the front office. What makes the bitterness even more damaging is that it poisons the entire organization from the top down. If the GM is bitter toward the franchise player, that sentiment filters down through the organization. Coaches feel it, players feel it, scouts feel it. Suddenly, everyone's motivation is compromised. The singular focus on winning basketball games gets clouded by office politics and personal resentment. This level of dysfunction doesn't happen overnight. It develops over time when people with personal relationships and shared history work together without proper oversight. Cox, White, Dunn, and Crosskopf have worked together for years, so there's familiarity and loyalty. But that same dynamic can prevent honest conversations about performance and accountability. When someone isn't doing their job, friends don't always fire them. They protect them. They make excuses. And they get bitter when outside voices point out the problems they're unwilling to address. The bitterness from Cox toward Clark is perhaps the clearest evidence that something is fundamentally wrong with how this organization is functioning. If the general manager of a professional basketball team is spending energy being upset about her superstar player, instead of focused on building a winning team, that's not just a management problem. That's a crisis that needs to be addressed immediately. The fact that the general manager is blocking journalists and prominent voices instead of defending her decisions is the biggest red flag of all. It's a signal that the organization knows it can't defend what it's doing, so instead of engaging in honest conversation, it's choosing to silence critics. That's not how professional sports organizations operate. That's not how leaders behave. And it's certainly not how you respond when you're confident in your decisions. If the organization was doing right by Clark, they wouldn't need to silence people. They'd have answers. They'd have a detailed coaching philosophy they could explain. They'd have a roster construction strategy they could defend. They'd have data and film study to back up their decisions. They'd have confidence. Instead, they're hiding behind social media blocks because they can't handle a real conversation about what's happening. That tells you everything. Jason Whitlock is a prominent sports commentator with a significant platform and reach. When he started calling out the obvious flaws in how Indiana is being coached and managed, he did it from the perspective of someone who knows basketball. His criticisms were grounded in actual basketball analysis. They weren't random tweets from someone who doesn't understand the game. They were substantive critiques of coaching decisions and organizational direction. Instead of responding to those critiques with her own analysis or explanation, Cox blocked him. She removed his voice from her social media sphere rather than engaging with what he was saying. That pattern repeated itself with other critics. Anyone who pointed out the unconventional rotations, the bizarre defensive switches, the apparent lack of strategy got blocked. It created this surreal situation where the general manager of an NBA franchise was using her personal Twitter account like it was a private chat room, removing anyone who said things she didn't want to hear. It's the digital equivalent of putting your fingers in your ears and refusing to listen. It's what someone does when they're panicking and don't have a rational response to the criticism. The blocking campaign backfired spectacularly. When you publicly block prominent journalists and media figures for doing their jobs, more people pay attention to why. When you remove critics from your social media, people assume you're doing it because you're afraid of what they're saying. The move amplified the criticism rather than silencing it. It made the story bigger, not smaller. Instead of controlling the narrative, Cox allowed it to spiral further out of control. What's particularly unprofessional about the blocking is that it violates basic norms of how executives should conduct themselves. A general manager might disagree with a journalist or commentator, but blocking them publicly is petty and reveals insecurity. It suggests that the GM doesn't have confidence in her decisions or the organization's direction. A confident leader would welcome scrutiny. They'd see criticism as an opportunity to explain their vision more clearly. They'd use it as a chance to get their message out to the public. The blocking also sends a message to the locker room. If players see that the GM is attacking critics on social media and blocking prominent voices, what does that tell them about the culture of the organization? It tells them that disagreement isn't welcome. It tells them that questioning decisions will result in consequences. It tells them that the front office is more interested in controlling the narrative than in building a winning team. That's toxic in a professional sports environment. When you're trying to run a championship-caliber organization, you need people willing to challenge you, question your decisions, and hold you accountable. You need critics. You need people pointing out when things aren't working. If your response to that scrutiny is to block critics and remove them from your social media, you've created an environment where no one will tell you the truth. Everyone will just agree with you because disagreement has consequences. The irony is that the blocking doesn't prevent the criticism from existing or spreading. It doesn't make the legitimate basketball concerns disappear. It only makes the organization look worse. It only confirms that the leadership knows it can't defend its decisions. If Cox had the answers, if she could explain the coaching philosophy and roster construction strategy with confidence, she wouldn't need to block anyone. The fact that she's resorting to censorship tells you that she doesn't have answers. She doesn't have confidence, and the organization is in serious trouble because of it. The pressure is visibly getting to this entire organization in ways we've simply never seen before. They weren't prepared for the level of scrutiny that comes with having a transcendent player on your roster, and instead of rising to the occasion and embracing the opportunity, they've turned defensive, bitter, and increasingly chaotic. They're more upset that Clark is a bigger story than the team's minor successes than they are focused on actually winning a championship. That's the fundamental problem. That's what indicates that this organization has lost its way. When your front office is resentful toward their own best player, that relationship is broken beyond repair. It's not something you fix with a meeting or a memo or a conversation. The damage is already done. The trust is already gone. At that point, the only solution is structural change. Someone needs to go. Either the coach needs to be fired, or the GM needs to step aside, or something major needs to happen to reset the entire culture of the organization. Look at how other organizations handle their stars. Teams with a Ja Wilson don't yank her out of games 4 minutes into the first quarter for no reason. Teams with Paige Buchers don't experiment with absurd rotation patterns in the middle of a tight race. Those organizations understand something fundamental that the Fever seem to have forgotten. You ride your best players to the finish line. You build everything around them. You protect them. You put them in positions to succeed. The Fever are doing the exact opposite, and it's a massive disservice not just to Clark, but to the fans who showed up specifically to watch the most exciting player in the league. The Fever had a generational opportunity. They won the lottery. They got the player that every single team in the WNBA wanted. They had a chance to build something special, to create a dynasty, to be the organization that maximizes one of the greatest talents in basketball. Instead, they're sabotaging it. Whether it's intentional or just catastrophic incompetence at every level, the result is the same. They're wasting Clark's early years in professional basketball. Caitlin Clark's time is valuable. She's only going to be young and hungry and at her physical peak for so long. Every year that she spends in a dysfunctional organization where the front office is resentful of her presence and the coaching staff seems designed to limit her effectiveness is a year that she's not developing in an optimal environment. It's a year where her potential isn't being maximized. It's a year that she can never get back. The Fever understand this, or at least they should. The fact that they don't appear to care reveals how broken the organization truly is. The fan base is reaching its breaking point, and they're making their voices heard across every platform. They didn't sign up to watch a coach play mind games with a superstar. They didn't sign up to watch a GM block everyone who disagrees with her on social media. They didn't sign up for a circus. The organization is treating the fans like they're stupid, like they can't see what's happening. But people see exactly what's occurring. They see the sabotage. They see the panic. They see the disrespect directed at their franchise's greatest player. Caitlin Clark and her agent are reportedly considering demanding a trade. And honestly, based on everything that's happened in Indiana, it would be hard to blame them. Why would any player want to stay in an organization where the people in leadership are resentful of their presence? Why would you want to spend your prime years in a situation where the coaching staff seems designed to undermine you? Why would you want to build a franchise in a place where the front office is more interested in controlling the narrative than in winning? This is a crisis point for the Indiana Fever. The organization has to change course immediately, or they're going to lose everything. The goodwill that came from getting Clark in the draft is gone. The opportunity to build something special is slipping away. The clock is running out on Stephanie White's tenure as head coach, and the walls are closing in on Amber Cox and the rest of the front office. They need to make major changes right now, or they're going down in history as the organization that threw away the greatest gift they ever received. The Indiana Fever organization is at a crossroads, and the decisions they make in the coming weeks and months will define their future. This is no longer about basketball alone. This is about whether an organization can recognize its failures, take responsibility, and make real changes, or whether it will double down on the same approach and watch everything collapse. The pressure mounting from every direction is becoming unbearable. Fans are demanding change. Critics are getting louder. And Caitlin Clark's patience with the situation is wearing thin. If the Fever continue down this path of blocking critics, yanking their star player out of games, and defending decisions that don't make sense, they will lose everything. The damage to the franchise's credibility will be severe. The loss of their generational talent would be catastrophic. The world is watching, and time is running out for this organization to figure out what they're doing and why. The only question left is, will they fix it or will they watch it burn?